Throughout the offseason so far, I've talked to you guys about players that I believe are going to have a breakout season, players that I think need to have a bounce back season. Now today in this video, I want to go over a handful of players that I believe have the most to prove during the 2023-24 NHL season, and this could be for various different reasons, whether it's a young former high draft pick that's drifting towards bust territory, or a veteran coming off of an incredibly disappointing season who has a massive contract kicking in this year. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, so if there's any players that I don't mention in this video that you believe have a lot to prove in the 2023-24 season, let me know who those players are and why down below in the comments. If this is your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button. We're on the road to 75,000. And with all that being said, let's start off the video with the player in the thumbnail, the player that I believe has the most to prove this season, and that is Zadina of the San Jose Sharks. Zadina made a massive bet on himself this offseason, agreeing with the Red Wings to terminate the remainder of his contract, and in doing so leaving about $3.6 million on the table. That is a massive gamble for a 23-year-old who's still relatively unestablished and is trying to find his game at the NHL level. And you have to imagine the whole situation had to be a very humbling experience for Zadina, as early in the offseason he requested a trade away from Detroit. Steve Yzerman came out and said that he tried to accommodate Zadina's request but couldn't find a trade partner, which then led to Steve Yzerman just placing Zadina on waivers. Zadina would clear waivers, so really the only way for Zadina to get what he wanted was contract termination, and that's exactly what happened. I definitely respect Zadina's decision to bet on himself. That's obviously a player who still has a ton of confidence in their game, which you love to see, but there's really no sugarcoating how massive of a season this is for the former 6th overall draft pick. San Jose gave him a 1-year prove-it deal worth $1.1 million, and if he doesn't see improvement in San Jose and puts up numbers similar to what he's been putting up in Detroit over the past couple of seasons, this is a guy who could find his way out of the NHL sooner rather than later. When it comes to Zadina's game, his play style, if he's not putting up points, he's really not doing a whole lot. This is a guy who's a decent puck transporter at 5-on-5, but he doesn't play very physical. He doesn't have a great 200-foot game, so if Zadina wants to stick at the NHL level and isn't a productive offensive player, he's going to have to pretty much completely transform his play style. I'm definitely rooting for Zadina. I would love nothing more than to see him pop off in San Jose. I'm not one of them salty Red Wings fans who don't want to see him succeed just because of how his tenure with the Red Wings ended, and also as somebody who was born and raised in Halifax, and as a Halifax Mooseheads fan, I'm always rooting for guys who played their junior career with the Mooseheads to succeed at the NHL level, so I'm definitely going to be watching Zadina and his season with the San Jose Sharks very closely. Moving along now to the next player on my list, we have Pierre-Luc Dubois of the Los Angeles Kings. The Kings acquired Dubois earlier this summer in a blockbuster trade involving the likes of Gabriel Velarde, Rasmus Kupari, and Alex Iafallo. I was at the time the trade happened, and I still am pretty iffy on that deal from the side of the Los Angeles Kings. Is Pierre-Luc Dubois a good player? Yes, he's an established top 6 centerman, but Dubois is now getting paid like a superstar. After the trade, the Los Angeles Kings signed Pierre-Luc Dubois to an 8-year, $68 million contract extension, which carries an annual cap hit of $8.5 million. That is a lot of money for somebody who has a career high of 63 points and doesn't necessarily have the greatest 200-foot game. With Pierre-Luc Dubois' size and skill set, this is a guy that should easily be a force at both ends of the ice, and we've seen stretches of play throughout his career where he has been exactly that, a force at both ends of the ice, but we've also seen stretches throughout his career where his effort and his work ethic is put into question. Dubois has now had 2 different situations with 2 different teams, and pretty ugly, obviously being Columbus and Winnipeg. He now finally finds himself on a team that he wants to play for long term. Of course, he signed that 8-year extension. I really believe that this is a massive year for Pierre-Luc Dubois. He has to prove that he is going to be worth everything that the Los Angeles Kings invested into him, and I think anything less than a career year for Pierre-Luc Dubois in his first season with the Kings will be viewed as a disappointment. Next up on my list, we have the one and only goaltender that we're going to talk about in this video, Jonas Gustavsson of the Ottawa Senators. Now, before I really get into this at all, I want to address something because I've been seeing so many comments on my videos recently from Senators fans saying that I have some sort of bias against Ottawa because I'm a Red Wings fan. I must have missed whenever this rivalry between Senators and Red Wings fans started, but I want to make one thing clear. I have absolutely no bias against the Ottawa Senators. In fact, it's actually quite the opposite. I want to see all Canadian teams succeed, and there really isn't any one team in the entire NHL that I dislike. So I wanted to get that out of the way to kind of clear things up, but I do feel like it is valid to have criticisms and also a little bit of concern when it comes to this Korpisalo contract. Yes, Jonas Korpisalo is coming off of a very solid season split between the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Los Angeles Kings, but this is somebody who throughout his NHL career so far has notoriously been very inconsistent. I mean, just look at his last 2 seasons prior to the one that just happened. He had a sub 900 save percentage in each of those years. Korpisalo is also somebody who's never started 40 or more games in a single season up until this point in his NHL career, so he's really never had the workload of a starting goaltender yet. I think the Senators made a pretty big gamble committing $20 million to a goaltender like Korpisalo over the next 5 years. Now, that being said, I could definitely see a scenario where this works out beautifully because, while yes, the term on the contract is pretty long at 5 years, a cap hit of just $4 million for a starting goaltender, if it works out, is great. So I really view this as a pretty high risk, high reward move by the Ottawa Senators, and I think Korpisalo has a lot to prove this year. He has to come out early and prove that he can be at least a solid starting goaltender for a playoff team, which is what the Ottawa Senators are striving for this year. Moving along now to the next player on my list, this is one that definitely doesn't need too much explaining, Jonathan Huberdeau of the Calgary Flames. Jonathan Huberdeau is somebody who I feel like has been featured in tons of my videos throughout the offseason so far, but I feel like it's for good reason. This year is going to be huge for Huberdeau. Coming off of his first season with the Calgary Flames, a season in which Jonathan Huberdeau set an NHL record for the largest point drop off from season to season, going from 115 points in the 2021-22 season with the Panthers to just 55 points this past season, a drop off of 60 points. After setting an NHL record like that, you have to imagine Jonathan Huberdeau is going to come out guns a-blazing this season, and as if there wasn't already enough pressure on Jonathan Huberdeau to bounce back, this season happens to be the first year in which his contract extension kicks in that will pay him $10.5 million a season through 2030-31. Huberdeau is now tied for the 10th highest cap hit in the league. As we all know, he wasn't anywhere close to a top 10 player this past season with the Flames. There's no sugarcoating how massive of a year this is for Jonathan Huberdeau. He has to bounce back and prove that he's at least close to worth that $10.5 million a season, because if he has another season like the one that he just had, or even in the 65 to 70 point range, this contract is quickly going to be looked at as one of the absolute worst in the league. Continuing on now, next up on my list, we have Alex Turcott of the Los Angeles Kings, their 5th overall draft pick from 2019. And when you look at all the players that were drafted around Alex Turcott in that 2019 top 10, as time goes by, this pick just continues to look worse and worse for Los Angeles. This past season was another rough year for Alex Turcott. He spent the majority of the season in the American Hockey League with the Ontario Reign, and it was an injury-plagued season. Played just 32 AHL games, had only 17 points in those games, which aren't really the dominant kind of numbers that you would hope a 5th overall draft pick is putting up at the American Hockey League level now in what was it, his draft plus 4 year. Alex Turcott has gotten called up to the Los Angeles Kings a couple of times. He's played a total of 12 games split between 2 seasons. Pointless in those 12 games, obviously playing very limited minutes. With Turcott now heading into his draft plus 5 season, likely starting in the AHL, but most importantly, fully healthy, the expectations are going to be high. This is somebody that I think really needs to take a massive step in their development, either start dominating at the AHL level or really take advantage and play incredibly well in limited minutes with the Los Angeles Kings if he's called up, because we know injuries are going to happen. Opportunities are going to arise, but Turcott has to make the most of those. If he has another stagnant year in terms of his development, then this is a guy who's quickly going to be heading towards bust territory. And now finally, finishing out the video with the last player on my list, Jonathan Drouin of the Colorado Avalanche. Drouin signed a 1-year, $825,000 deal with the Avalanche earlier this summer, and I don't think it's too crazy to assume that if this season in Colorado doesn't work out for Drouin, that he might be running out of opportunities. And the opportunity doesn't get much bigger than this season for Jonathan Drouin. On just a 1-year league minimum contract, this is a guy who's going to start the season, or at least start training camp and preseason, on Nathan MacKinnon's wing, reuniting the former Halifax Mooseheads together. If you've never seen Jonathan Drouin's highlights from when he played for the Mooseheads in the Q, I suggest you go and watch a montage, because this guy was absolutely ridiculous ridiculous. He was McDavid level in the QMJHL. If you combine the 2012-13 and 2013-14 seasons, in just 95 games, Jonathan Drouin put up 213 points. Again, like I mentioned earlier in the video, I'm always rooting for former Mooseheads to succeed at the NHL level, and when Drouin was drafted, I thought this guy was going to be an absolute superstar in the NHL. As we all know, that hasn't happened. Jonathan Drouin had just 2 goals in 58 games this past season with the Canadiens. Now, goal scoring has never been Jonathan Drouin's best asset. It's been his vision and his playmaking, but for a high skill forward, still 2 goals in 58 games, that's not cutting it. I am fascinated to see what kind of season Drouin is going to have in Colorado. I'm really hoping that him and McKinnon can kind of rekindle the magic that they had together back in junior. At this point in his career, I don't think Jonathan Drouin's ever going to be, a 90, 100 point player like I thought he was going to be when he was originally selected 3rd overall by the Lightning in 2013, but I would love to see it if he can just at least stick on McKinnon's wing, keep up with them, and be a productive player. And man, would that ever be a bargain for the Colorado Avalanche, getting a top 6 winger, a top line winger at just $825K. So that is going to wrap up today's video. Those are some NHL players that I believe have a ton to prove heading into the 2023-24 season. Like I said at the start of the video, I'm always wanting to hear what you guys are thinking, so if there's any players that I didn't mention in this video that you feel like have a lot to prove this season, let me know who those players are and why you think they have a lot to prove down below in the comments. If you guys enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave it a like. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this is your first time coming across the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.